"Don't touch me." Those were the first words Isabelle remembered from her wedding night. Not whispered in longing or even in awkward nervousness, but delivered like a court order, cold, final, and transactional. She stood frozen in her wedding gown, a delicate ivory-lace dress that hugged her slender figure, designed by one of Paris's top designers. The soft satin hem brushed the floor of the luxurious honeymoon suite in Big Sur, overlooking the ocean. The waves crashed far below the cliffs, violent and wild, just like the storm building in her chest. Damon Cross didn't even look at her when he said it. He was standing across the room, undoing his cufflinks like he was wrapping up a board meeting. "I did this to protect your father," he said flatly. "Let's not pretend it's anything else." Isabelle blinked rapidly, swallowing the lump in her throat. "You made it sound like a partnership." "It is," Damon replied coolly. "A strategic alliance, not a love story." Then, without another word, he tossed his blazer on a nearby chair and walked over to the leather couch. He lay down, loosened his tie, and closed his eyes. And that was their wedding night. Isabelle didn't sleep at all. 3 years passed. That suite marked the beginning of a silent routine. They lived in the same mansion, attended the same functions, posed for photos, smiled in public, but shared nothing in private. No intimacy, no tenderness, not even casual conversation. It was like being married to a ghost. People whispered about them, of course. The tabloids speculated everything from secret affairs to infertility to Damon being aromantic. But Isabelle knew the truth, and it was far more painful. Damon Cross had simply built a wall between himself and the world, and she was just the latest soul stuck on the outside. But she stayed. Because she remembered the day he walked into her father's collapsing business empire with a pen and a lifeline. Because she remembered how her father cried, saying, "He saved us." And because Isabelle had signed a contract too. 3 years. No expectations. No obligations. No physical relationship. In exchange, her family would be safe. Her father's company saved. Her mother's medical bills paid. Her little brother's tuition secured. All she had to do was become Mrs. Isabelle Cross in name only. But something changed recently. Damon started noticing her. The way his eyes lingered a second longer than before. The way his hand almost touched hers when passing her wine at dinner. The way his jaw clenched when another man paid her a compliment at a gala. Now, the contract was about to expire. At midnight, she would finally be free. Free to walk away from the coldest marriage she had ever known. But that evening, as the clock neared 12, Damon didn't walk past her like he usually did. He walked toward her, and for the first time in 3 years, Isabelle's heart dared to hope. She's just a decoration. Isabelle had overheard the words more times than she could count. At high society luncheons, behind half-filled champagne flutes and false smiles. At Silicon Valley galas, whispered between power brokers and their Botoxed wives. Even on red carpets, when reporters leaned too close to the microphone and forgot she had ears. To them, she was an ornament. A porcelain doll attached to the arm of one of America's most eligible, coldest billionaires. But they didn't know what Isabelle knew. They didn't know that Damon Cross, behind his icy glares and black tailored suits, wasn't heartless. He was wounded, guarded, hardened by something she still couldn't quite name. They didn't know that on her first birthday as Mrs. Cross, he'd sent her a rare book she had casually mentioned loving as a teenager, something out of print for decades. Or that he'd paid off her best friend's medical debt anonymously after her emergency surgery, without saying a word. He was silent, but never blind. Still, Damon made no move to break the walls between them. And Isabelle never forced the issue. She remembered the night they signed the marriage contract. His terms were clear. 3 years, no physical contact, no expectations. Just public appearances and a private agreement. "Why do this at all?" she had asked, half hoping he'd crack and say he wanted something real. But he hadn't. "Because your family needs saving. And I need a wife. At least, one the board will approve of." His father had left him a billion-dollar tech empire, but with a clause. To assume full control of the Cross Foundation Trust, Damon needed to appear stable, settled, and above scandal. A wife gave him that image. And Isabelle, with her family name and spotless reputation, was the perfect fit. So Isabelle had agreed. Not out of desperation, but sacrifice. Her father was on the brink of collapse. The banks were circling, and the shame would have destroyed him. So she married Damon. Gave up 3 years of her life. Put on the pretty dresses. Smiled for the cameras. And waited. At first, she told herself she didn't care. She poured herself into running her art gallery, finding solace in color, texture, and canvas. She hosted charity events, made public appearances, played the role. But slowly, she started noticing things. The way Damon lingered in the doorway during her interviews. The way he shut down any man who tried to get too friendly with her. The way his jaw tensed when she laughed too loudly at someone else's joke. Then, last month, a delivery arrived at her studio. A custom oil painting, her favorite scene from her favorite novel. She had only mentioned it once, years ago, in a passing conversation. No note, no name, but she knew it was from him. And that's when she started to wonder. Was Damon Cross, the man who refused to even touch her, beginning to care? Because if he was, he had just days left to prove it. The contract expired at midnight. You don't have to pretend anymore, Isabelle said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm surging in her chest. It was 11:42 p.m. The mansion was quiet, save for the distant hum of the ocean breeze through the glass walls. She stood in the doorway of Damon's study, the firelight casting warm shadows across the sleek furniture and towering bookshelves. He sat at his desk, unmoving, a leather-bound folder lying open in front of him. Inside it, their marriage contract. In 13 minutes, it would no longer exist. I know how this goes, Isabelle continued. You'll file the dissolution papers, I'll move out, and everything will be neat and clinical, just the way you like it. Damon still didn't look at her. He stared at the folder like it was something more than paper, like it was holding him hostage. Isabelle shifted. 3 years, Damon. 3 years of sleeping in separate rooms. 3 years of pretending we don't notice each other. 3 years of being married, but never being together. Finally, he stood. The leather chair creaked behind him, and she tensed instinctively. He walked slowly toward her, stopping just inches away, close enough that she could see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw and the conflicted fire in his eyes. I burned it, he said quietly. She blinked. What? He nodded toward the fireplace. The edges of the contract folder were blackened, curling from the heat. A few scraps of ash floated above the embers like ghosts. I burned it an hour ago. Isabelle's heart stumbled. But why? He looked at her then, really looked at her, and something in him broke open. I told myself I married you to save your family. That's what I needed to believe, because if I admitted the real reason, he paused, breath hitching. I saw you, Isabelle, from the first moment, and you terrified me. Her brow furrowed. Why? Because you were everything I didn't believe in. Kindness, loyalty, hope. I've been betrayed by everyone who ever claimed to love me. So I built a wall, and then I put you behind it, and I told myself it was protection. Her hands trembled. You locked me out of your life to protect yourself. I know, he whispered, and it was the worst mistake I ever made. The clock on the wall ticked, 11:59 p.m. His voice cracked as he reached for her hand. But I can't keep pretending I don't feel anything for you. I can't let this end without telling you the truth. Her breath caught. I love you, Isabelle. I've loved you quietly, secretly, stubbornly, for every one of these last 3 years. But I was too much of a coward to show it. Tears pooled in her eyes, but she didn't blink them away. I don't need the contract anymore, he said, voice raw. I need you. And as the clock struck midnight, Isabelle finally whispered the words she'd been holding for 3 years. Then take me, Damon. But this time, not because you're saving me. She touched his hand gently. Because you're choosing me. They didn't kiss that night. Not yet. Instead, they sat on the edge of the bed, the same bed Damon had avoided for over 1,000 nights, and talked until dawn painted streaks of gold across the Pacific horizon. There were no lawyers in the room. No contracts. No signatures. Just two people who had been legally bound for 3 years and emotionally starved for just as long. Tell me the truth, Isabelle asked softly, curling her legs beneath her silk robe. What happened to you, Damon? What made you this guarded? Damon exhaled slowly, his fingers locked together as he stared down at the floor. I wasn't always like this. She waited. I was 15 when my mom left, he began. She said she was going to the grocery store. She never came back. Left a note saying she couldn't live in a house that felt more like a company than a home. My dad didn't even flinch. He poured himself a drink and said, now we can finally run things properly. Isabelle's chest tightened. I spent the next decade chasing approval from a man who didn't know how to love anyone. He taught me that emotions were liabilities, that people are only loyal when it's convenient. I built walls because I had to. And your ex? She asked gently. He hesitated. Jenna, he said. We met just after I sold my first company. I thought she loved me for me. Turns out, she loved what I could give her. She drained $2 million from a shared account and disappeared with a man I considered my best friend. They both sold off company secrets and nearly destroyed everything I built. Isabelle covered her mouth, eyes wide. You never told anyone. Because I was ashamed, he admitted. Ashamed I let myself feel anything. I promised it would never happen again. She swallowed hard. And then you met me. Damon looked at her, eyes suddenly glassy. You were different. When we first talked at your father's auction, you didn't try to impress me. You didn't flirt. You were just honest. Fierce. Real. I knew I needed someone like you beside me. I just didn't know how to let you in. He took her hand, this time without hesitation. So I made it a contract. Because it felt safer that way. If I didn't touch you, I wouldn't fall for you. But you did. He nodded. Every day? A little more. Isabelle smiled, brushing his knuckles with her thumb. You didn't have to be perfect, Damon. You just had to be honest. The sun was now rising fully, casting a glow across the bed where they sat. He leaned in, not to kiss her, but to rest his forehead gently against hers. I don't want to waste another second. Then don't, she whispered. We've already lost 3 years. Let's not lose this moment. And as the light poured in, two strangers who had worn wedding rings without meaning finally began their real beginning. Together. 3 months later, the world couldn't believe it. Damon Cross holds wife's hand. After 3 years of nothing. Isabelle Cross, from contract wife to power couple queen. Cold marriage? Not anymore. Cross heats up in Napa. The tabloids were eating it up. Paparazzi snapped photos of Damon and Isabelle walking hand in hand through the vineyard he'd purchased just for her. No longer the ghostly couple who barely exchanged glances. Now, they were magnetic. Warm. Alive. And none of it was for show. Isabelle sat on a picnic blanket overlooking the hills of Napa Valley. Her bare feet brushed the grass as Damon poured wine into her glass, smiling. Actually smiling, the kind that reached his eyes. The kind she hadn't seen in years. Do you remember what you told me on our wedding night? She asked playfully, tipping her glass toward him. Damon groaned, mockingly embarrassed. Please don't remind me. You said, let's not make it something it isn't. He set the bottle down, then reached for her hand. And now I'm saying, let's make it everything it was always meant to be. The change in Damon hadn't come overnight. But once he let himself love, he loved fully. He started walking her to her gallery every morning, just to hear about her latest exhibitions. He read her favorite books, took her to places she dreamed of as a child. And he listened, really listened, to her heart, her stories, her dreams. And when they returned to the same luxury suite where their marriage had begun, Damon made sure everything was different. The lights were dim. The fire was warm. A soft melody played in the background. And on the bed, no longer untouched, lay a small velvet box. Isabelle opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a ring. Not the diamond he had given her 3 years ago, the one chosen by his lawyer, but a new one, custom-made. Sapphire, the color of the dress she wore the first night he fell for her. Surrounding it, 3 tiny diamonds, symbolizing the years they had survived and the fire they had walked through. Damon took her hand and went down on one knee. Isabelle Monroe Cross, he said, voice soft but steady. Will you marry me again? Not because we signed a contract, but because this time, I want you. All of you. Forever. Tears streamed down her face, but her smile was brighter than the Napa sun. Yes, she whispered, pulling him into the kiss they had waited 3 long years to share. That night, Damon didn't sleep on the couch, and as the firelight danced across the walls, he whispered between kisses, I've claimed companies. Empires. Fortune. He leaned closer, pressing his forehead to hers. But nothing compares to claiming the heart of the only woman who ever truly saw me. And for the first time in their marriage, 3 years, 3 months, and 8 days later, Isabelle whispered back the words he had waited a lifetime to hear. You're mine too, Damon. Always. And this time, they didn't just share a name. They shared everything.